Morning, everyone. So there's been a lot of news, let's be honest, but I want to, we'll probably talk about lots of things, but I want to focus first of all on where the Tories are at the moment, because pretty much all they've got left is their tax cuts plan. And the Mirror wrote quite an interesting article. I have put a description, a link in the description below if you go right down to the bottom of the description. It is quite interesting. There's some things, people may know that I have said for well over half a year now that I think May is the most likely date for the election, May the 2nd specifically. And at the moment, that is still my view. Never mind all the journalists saying, oh, no, it's autumn. It's like, yeah. A lot of them are Tory client journalists who are trying to help wrong-foot Labour, and the others are probably just idiots. I don't know. I've certainly seen whenever a journalist has tried to explain their reasoning why they think it's October, it never stacks up, or November, come to that. It never stacks up. I'm not saying it's impossible. It's just they are absolutely trying for May. Apart from anything else, at the moment, and again, these things aren't always obvious unless you're paying a close attention. The Conservatives, first of all, CCHQ, Conservative Campaign Headquarters, is absolutely a buzz. It's absolutely rammed. They're working at election pace. Now, you don't do that 8 months out. Secondly, they are spending hand over fist on social media ads and things like that. They are spending an absolute fortune. They're very, very active on social media. And that is costing them a lot of money. And, you know, I don't see how they can afford to keep that spend up until October, November. At which point you say, if they end up deciding to, so that basically tells you at the moment they are aiming for May. They are definitely aiming for May. There's no doubt about it. However, there are a couple of things that could potentially make it tricky for them. I mean, the first is the fact that this Thursday we may be told we're in recession. There is a slightly better than, we don't know, it's really nip and tuck. But there's a slightly better than 50% chance that we're in recession. And the thing is, if that happens, not only is that going to be really bad headlines for Sunak, but it means that if they do have an election on May the 2nd, there is no way that it can be announced we're out of recession before the election. Because for us to be out of recession, Q1 of this year, the one we're in at the moment, halfway through, has to be growth. Or at least stagnant, at least zero. So that can't be announced until like mid-May. We won't get the figures for that until mid-May. Now, Rishi Sunak can try saying, oh, well, I've seen some, preliminary figures and they're actually looking really good. Yeah, but that's not proof. You could be lying, mate. So we won't know. But there's another thing as well, and that's their tax cuts plan. So it's quite obvious that they're cutting taxes to try and, it's a pre-election bribe, and they'll put them straight back up afterwards, just like they did in 92. And people at the moment aren't falling for it. So they tried the national insurance cut in January. Tory strategists, we're told, recognise that hasn't worked. I mean, we can sort of see that it hasn't been enough because Labour's poll lead's actually widened. In fact, just as a bit of a laugh, we'll wait and see what happens over the next week. But, Labour have obviously had a nightmare 5 days due to one thing or another by their standards. And yet the polls that have been coming out over the last few days have still showed Labour's poll lead widening. So however bad things have been for Labour, they've been way worse for the Tories. And, but even under the bonnet, Tory strategists have realised that their tax cut thing didn't work. So they're trying it again in March. The issue is, can they? Because the Mirror made an interesting point. They don't think they can. They're whoever wrote, in fact, I could have a look at who wrote it, but it doesn't necessarily matter. Actually, I can't see. Can't see. It just says, oh, Fleet Street Fox. Okay, fine. Don't know who that is. Whoever has written this is absolutely convinced that the Tories can't do it. So what's the rationale for why the Tories cannot instigate any more tax cuts? It's the fact that they're unfunded. So, we talked about this in the agenda on Friday, I think. Last week, Laura Trott, who's the Chief Secretary of the Treasury, she's basically Jeremy Hunt's second in command. So she's a very senior, she's the second most senior member of the Treasury. She attends cabinet, for example. So very, so basically one of the people in charge of our country's finances. And it was put to her that her fiscal rule is that debt has to fall as a share of GDP over 5 years. And she said that. She said that herself. That is one of our fiscal rules. Debt has to, we cannot do anything if it means debt rising over 5 years. So it was pointed out to her that the OBR's figures, the latest figures, which are from November, show that debt is rising in 5 years, that debt as a share of GDP will be higher in 5 years than it is now. And she didn't get that, but nonetheless, that is true. So if the current forecast based on the government's budgets is that debt is going to go up as a share of GDP, they can't afford tax cuts. They would be breaking their own fiscal rules. Oh, Fleet Street Fox's Susie Boniface. Okay. Not familiar with those, I don't think. But that's the basis for it, that the Tories will be breaking their own fiscal rules. Now, here's where I have a question. So I don't think the Tories care about breaking their own fiscal rules as such, because they don't care about anything at the moment. They're a wounded animal backed into a corner. They'll do whatever they need to do for their own advantage. We know that it's going to be very, very nasty this year. They don't care who they trample over. They don't care what they trample over. The whole country could be burnt to ashes for all they care, as long as they can, not be humiliated in the election. And it is possible. Some people, speculate that there are some Tories who are so desperate, because not just because they will lose power. Some of them may worry that they're in the frame for legal action later on, that, some serious criminal activity has been going on that may well be uncovered if they're not in power to cover it up. But the question for me is, how will the markets react if they do break their fiscal rules? Because where I might disagree slightly with the author of this Mirror piece is the Tories have already instigated unfunded tax cuts. The national insurance cut in January was instigated without being able to say that debt is going to fall as a share of GDP, and they got away with that. So have they got away with that because that was a relatively modest amount of £9 billion? Does it mean that they can't have anything more this March, or does it mean that they just won't be able to do enough? Because the Tories are in a bit of a trap here. They can't afford to go full quasi-Kwarteng. They have to avoid the quasi-Kwarteng trap. They can't afford for there to be a run on the pound, or even to avoid a run on the pound for the Bank of England to have to win. If they trigger another Liz Truss level mini budget, are they going to win any seats? Are they going to win any seats at all? They will certainly absolutely crush themselves. They will be utterly ruined. Because you look at the way the polls reacted after the Liz Truss mini budget, the Tories have got nowhere else to go. I mean, you'd almost feel that if that's what they did, they'd probably have to get rid of him and go long and actually go till January and they'd probably have to get someone else, but it would be like futile. So, it's an awkward one. So they definitely cannot risk that. So that means that might suggest that they have to go a bit easy on the tax cuts, but then that might annoy the far right. That might annoy the sort of low tax brigade, and they may cause more trouble then as well. So this budget in March could be actually looking quite tricky for them. But anyway, I'll catch up with some comments because there have been lots of other things going on as well. Talking about I think people are talking about Sunak's conduct on the GB News thing. I haven't seen that. I have been watching some clips. Some of it is quite spectacular. Thought Sunak's behaviour when threatened with random questions at the end of the programme was revealing by deciding there was insufficient time, proving that the questions he asked were plants. We know the questions were plants because, of course, as you may have seen on the video last night, Graham sort of wangled himself a place in the audience. And before they looked him up online and said, yeah, no, you're not coming, they had made it clear to him he had to ask a specific question. Now, granted, it was a question he'd submitted, but it shows that they were curating the questions and they were making it clear to people they couldn't change their question on the night. So the questions were 100. You say I'm in for a treat, Phil. No, I'm not in for a treat because I ain't watching it. I will watch some clips. I am not watching GB News. If Graham had been on, I was prepared to record it whilst I was in a different room and then try and find that clip later in my recording. As it was, no. But there are always people who sacrifice their sanity to watch these things on my behalf, clip it and put it on Twitter. So that's where I'll be this morning, looking through Twitter. I've already found a few beauties, so I will certainly be covering it myself later. But I will not be watching the whole thing, so there will be some things I miss inevitably. But there were some, yeah. I mean, well, put it this way: from what I've seen so far, it just highlights why I think, and I've said, Rishi Sunak is mad to chase after the Reform UK vote. The only line he's got to try and persuade. So we're talking about there's a significant group of 2019 Conservative voters who are going to vote Reform UK at this election. Now, this is, of course, assuming Reform UK stand their candidates, but I am sort of minded to think they will now. The only line the Tories have for them is that if you vote Reform UK, you're helping Labour get into government. That's the only line. Because these people hate Labour more than the Conservatives, arguably. So that's the only line they have. However, it will only work on so many. It may work on a few. It's the best line they've got. It may work on a few. It's only work on so many. It's like, I mean, Labour have had this for all my life. You know, there's been parties that split the vote with Labour, you know, and Labour will say the same thing. They'll say, well, you know, you're just helping the Tories into power. And there are some people who just go, I don't care. Even though they think the Tories are the worst option, some people will just say, yeah, but I want to vote this way. And the same thing will happen with these Reform UK voters. But the madness of it is, that is the only line the Tories should be playing. If you vote Reform UK, you're just helping Labour. That is the only line. Anything else, and it showed yesterday because I've seen, you know, of the few clips, the most remarkable clip I saw was a full-on COVID conspiracy theorist, right? And Sunak couldn't deal with it. Sunak couldn't deal with this person. And I'm thinking, but this is what you're doing. You're chasing after the votes of conspiracy theorists. You will never win them back. Because to win them back, you would have to say that you agree with their madness. You would have to become Andrew Bridgen, right? Now, that's not going to happen because Sunak knows that he will lose a load. He already is probably at something of a bit of a flaw with the centre of it. Like, there are some people around the centre that are still going to vote Conservative. They're just going to do that. But he can lose more of them if he goes conspiracy theorist. So we can't afford to go conspiracy theorist. Well, Angry Pagan, £2 super chat. Thank you very much. Says Labour making a hash of the campaign in Rochdale. Well, they were doing. They've now drawn a line under it. So yeah, we'll talk about this as well. Why not? So I'm sure everyone knows. I'm going to say for those who don't know, I can't imagine anyone doesn't know. So Labour's candidate for Rochdale was filmed maddeningly in a Labour Party meeting. So that means everyone there didn't make a complaint, right? It's a complete mess. Promoting a conspiracy theory related to the current war between Israel and Palestine, effectively. And but the recording, there was a recording made, so someone up to nefarious purposes, and the recording wasn't published until it's too late for Labour to do anything about it, because the deadline for candidates passed over a week ago, and it was published in the Mail on Sunday, right? So that was a mess. And what Labour needed to do was to instantly drop him, and they didn't. Now, as far as I can tell, excuse me, the fear was that it gives the green light to Galloway. Now, I would say two things for that. First of all, who cares, ultimately? Because it was doing more damage to Labour to be seen to be standing by this candidate than it could possibly be to let Galloway maybe win the by-election. The second thing is, actually, it should. I don't know because it's all crazy, but I would think there's a good chance that Galloway is now, he has the feet cut from under him because he's standing as an anti-Labour vote. Well, there's no Labour vote anymore. It will say Labour on the ballot paper, by the way. So there's still a good chance that Ali wins because people going into the polling booth, if they're not really up on what's going on, they'll still see a Labour choice. It's just it's not Labour, right? And, you know, support for Labour is so strong in Rochdale, like so amazingly strong. There is still a good chance Ali wins anyway. He doesn't have the Labour whip if he wins, and Labour will choose another candidate for the general election. And Galloway just effectively, what's he campaigning against now? What is he campaigning against? That's not to say he couldn't win, because, you know, he's also trying to make it this sort of vote about Gaza, but I'm not sure there's enough votes in it for him. So it was a bit of a mess. Labour have acted, you could say, it took them, I think, about 43, 44 hours from when the story broke. Now, that, for me, is too long for them to be able to say, we acted quickly. But at the same time, it's not so long. Like, people will say they've acted under duress. That's inevitable. That's why they should have come to the decision more quickly. But it's not like it took a week or something. So, you know, they can draw a line under it. I don't really expect any. There was someone on Sky, I think, going, "Oh, this could be the turning point. This could be where Labour, their lead collapses and it all unravels." It's like, don't be stupid, mate. Had they stuck, and, you know, there's a couple of super chats, so I'm going to cover those in one moment. Had they stuck by, like, because there was a suggestion, what they might do was campaign so that Galloway didn't win, then announce that he's no longer has the whip. That would have been an absolutely terrible situation, because not only would it have meant dragging on for weeks, because there's by-elections this week, but the Rochdale by-elections on the 29th of Feb. So it would have dragged on for weeks. It would have looked like Labour were acting under duress, and it would have been a screw you to the people of Rochdale. It would have been Rochdale saying, "Oh, this is our candidate." Only kidding. So that wouldn't be good. Anyway, catch up with the super chats. Tinkanator, £20 super chat. Thank you very much. I've noticed the Tories are whining that their vote collapse is causing the death of democracy. So, yeah, I saw that. Says the party that's been weakening. They don't care about the demise of democracy, only their precious party. Well, I mean, I've said many times, if you look at the 2019 Conservative Party manifesto, it is a manifesto to destroy democracy. Remember, the Tories thought they had a good 10 years. They did not imagine that Labour were going to come back after 2019. As far as they were concerned, it wasn't just that Labour only won about 200 seats, which was cataclysmic. It was the fact that the Tories won in seats that they never should have been able to win, you know, the so-called red wall. They thought they'd cracked it. They thought they'd broken politics. Whereas in reality, all they'd done was built up fake support on shifting sands with their levelling up and Brexit lies, and Labour were amateurish, completely amateurish. They'd replaced all the professionals with student political protesters, people whose only experience of politics was waving a placard or writing some bollocks in the Guardian. So, you know, that was all it was. All Labour, you know, in time, the Tory lies were going to unravel, and as long as Labour sorted themselves out, which they have, you know, I mean, I didn't think Labour would win. I'll be honest, I never saw it coming, but the Tories definitely never. So they thought they had 10 years to completely unpick democracy, and then they didn't. That's sad. And then George, £5 super chat. Thank you. It says Graham told GB News that he was pro-Brexit Tory in order to be accepted for the audience. Could that bite him in the arse? Yeah, I mean, obviously they could say, "Oh, well, we just found out you lied." But we all know in reality, like, okay, I haven't watched it, but some of you clearly have watched it. Were there a load of questions that were clearly attacking Brexit? Were there? Were there a load of questions that made it sound like that audience was actually representative or even balanced? I strongly say, I haven't watched it, but I'm going to guess not. Putting they say, I mean, Phil, they did break politics this time around, but not in the way they thought. Well, no, everything that's happened is according to established political gravity. It's just that the Tories keep trying to swim upstream. They keep behaving in a way that political gravity doesn't exist. That is why the polls have been as they are. You will never find polling in British history that shows a lead like this for the party of opposition for this sustained period of time. You know, you won't even find it back in the 90s, which was also remarkable, as when you do it proportionally. Remember, back in the 90s, there was almost nobody voted for anyone other than Labour, the Conservatives, or the Lib Dems. It's like, you know, that was if you added up the voting intention for Labour, the Lib Dems, and the Conservatives, it basically added up to about 97%. It was like virtually everyone in the country was going to vote for one of those three. Now it's very different. Now, if you add them up, it gets to like 70-something%. So, yeah, it's, or maybe close to 80, but so we haven't seen anything like this. And it's because the Conservatives they're not taking account of political gravity. They don't understand it. Rishi Sunak and the senior Conservative MPs they're not politicians. Rishi Sunak's not a politician. He was asked to become a candidate, you know, to boost up the number of people from ethnic minorities in the Conservative Party. He jumped at the chance of trying to make himself a bit richer. He had no education in politics before that point. And because, you know, he rose very quickly because of the vagaries of Boris Johnson and Brexit, he never bothered to learn how politics works. Because he became very senior, he thought, like, what would happen if you started a career and then you were accelerated really quickly? Would you think you've got lots to learn? No, you'd think you were like a natural, wouldn't you? Oh, I'm just a natural. I don't need to learn about these things. So, of course, someone with the arrogance of someone who went to Winchester is going to think he already knows it all. And then he surrounds himself by advisors who are the same. People on his wavelength instead of people who'll tell him he's wrong. Is Sunak's admission that he was spread betting on cricket going to bite him? I suspect not, because I think because even Starmer didn't make anything of that at PMQs. And if it was going to be like an issue for Sunak, Starmer would have absolutely mentioned it, because he did mention the bet. He didn't mention the spread betting on cricket type thing, which was known by then. But there it is. When people leave political parties, do they get an exit poll? Thinking about Nick Candy or whatever his name is, Holly's beard. Well, they don't need to for someone like that. They can just ask them, and they'll quite happily tell you. I mean, not really. I don't think so. Like, if you mean like you leave membership of a party, he wasn't necessarily even a member. I don't know whether he's a member or not. But you know, there it is. Adrian Byrne, thank you very much for 99 super chat. Just wanted to chip in and say, keep up the good work, guys. We're all on the election. Yes, well, again, you know, it's really hard. Like, I just look at it, and the Tories it's like they're 95% committed to an election in May, because they're spending like mad. Their campaign headquarters at full tilt. They're in full election mode. Rishi Sunak says he's going to go out and meet members of the public 3 times a week now. This is campaign mode. This is general election campaign mode. This is not about the local elections. He didn't do this last year for the local elections. This is not for the local elections. It's not for the mayoral elections. This is for the general election. They want they're still waiting. Now, if they change their mind, they're going to have to stop that spend. But then where does more money come from to start it up again? Where does it come from? Because Harry Cole, who's the Tory shill at the Sun, he was saying, oh, the Tories are fine because they got £16.5 million in like the last 4 months of donations, as if that's a lot. And it's like, mate, no, they didn't. They got £6.5 million, because £10 million of that was left in a will by a Tory donor who died. They wouldn't have otherwise had it, right? So in reality, they only raised 6.5 million. So, and that is because why would, like, there are some Tory donors who are genuine Tory donors, right? They actually want the Tories to win. So they will donate to them. Just like I donate to Labour, I don't expect anything back. I don't get anything back, obviously. I'm not donating millions. But there are some Tory donors who will donate a few 100,000 or 1 million because without wanting anything in return. There are some genuine ones, but quite a lot of them do it as an investment. Quite a lot of them do it because, oh, I'll give you this money, then you put me in the House of Lords, or I'll give you this money and I want a public contract later on for my business. Yeah, they want a financial, or even if it's not that shady, they just want access to ministers. They want to be able to lobby them. You know, that's not corruption as such, because that happens. But again, if you don't think they're going to win, you wouldn't pay for that access because that access isn't going to be there. You know, you'll be paying Tories what when Labour are going to be the ministers? No, you don't do that. You'll switch to Labour, which is exactly why people like this probably have. You know, the boss of Iceland, for example, switched to Labour. Do you think he switched to Labour just because he prefers a Labour government? Maybe he does. But I'll tell you something. If he's donating to Labour, he wants access to Labour's ministers when they're in government. That's what he wants. So, and he'll get it. So, you know, why would a Tory donor, other than like the ones who are just doing it, you know, to help the Tories, why would anyone donate to them? So they're going to struggle for donations, I would think, this year, because they're on for a hiding. Many businesses fund both sides to get an in with the respective party. Well, absolutely. If you can afford, right? If you can afford to donate £1 million, absolutely, you could afford to. You know, if you donate £500,000 to Labour, you are going to get access to Rachel Reeves if that's what you want, or Johnny Reynolds, or someone else. You know, just for a lunch. If you want to say, look, I'll, you know, £500,000 to attend, or just to attend. Like Labour held a meeting a couple of weeks ago, a week or two ago. And it cost £1,000 a head to go there, but you got to talk to people from Labour. £1,000, that's all it costs. So that sort of thing happens all the time. So you can do that. So you can absolutely fund both sides because it doesn't. If you've got money to throw around like that, it doesn't cost you that much to have a meeting. Could I cover the Senate leadership elections? £2 super chat, Senate deputy journey. I mean, at some point, I tell you, for me personally, I don't know about Graham. For me personally, often I don't end up talking a lot about Welsh politics. And do you know the reason? Because it sort of works. It's all sort of normal. There's no drama. It just does what it does. Whereas everywhere else, there's drama. You know, there's Westminster drama. You know, around the in London, mayoral situation, drama. Scottish Parliament, drama. Northern Ireland, you can bet there's drama. Welsh Parliament, nothing really happens. Nothing really happens. The Tories go, we should have more 20-mile-an-hour zones. And everyone else goes, oh, that's a good idea. Let's do that. And then the Tories goes, how dare you implement more 20-mile-an-hour zones? This is an outrage. This is disgusting. This is worse than the Holocaust. What are you doing? But that's just normal party politics. You know, the Tories aren't empowering Wales, so everything just sort of works normally. You know, and despite the fact that the Tories keep saying, "Oh, yeah, oh, if you want to see how the NHS works, just look at Welsh NHS." Yeah, let's look at the Welsh NHS. The Welsh NHS have been taking on patients from Cornwall and Devon to try and ease the crisis in the NHS in England. That's what's been happening in the Welsh NHS. How much money do Labour have? £2 super chat. Thank you from Gary. I'm not sure. Every now and then they do post it each year. How many donations? Last year, when the figures were posted, Labour had made more in donations than the Conservatives. Obviously, this £10, it's £10, sorry, that's not going to go very far. This £10 million that the Tories got with this will boost it a lot. That will mean that in the last few months, they probably got more than Labour. But I think overall, Labour are attracting more donations. But I don't know exactly. But they do have to publish their finances. So every year you do get a report. So you may be able to look it up. I'm not sure. Just go through the last few because we're running out of time again. Sickening that politicians can take that amount of money to access them when people are struggling. Well, I mean, that's not an issue. The amount of money in British politics, though, is really very small. I keep saying it doesn't cost very much to bribe a politician in this country. If you look at America, like people were pointing out, the amount of, like, for those who are vaguely aware of American politics, Ron DeSantis, right, who was basically like, if it's possible, a thicker version than Donald Trump. And he's now cancelled his campaign. He was campaigning to become the Republican nominee, for the US presidential election this year. And he's pulled out now, he's stopped. But he spent more money on the campaign, which cut short. He spent more money on his campaign than you are going to get spent by every political party in this country on the general election. The amount of money in America, I mean, even taking into account 5 times the population type thing, it is breathtaking. We have nothing like that in this country. But the flip side of it is it doesn't cost very much to bribe an MP. You know, if you want access to a minister, it doesn't, particularly if it's a Tory minister, it does not cost you very much at all to get access. Whereas in America, at least they have to cough up quite a lot. But in terms of the people struggling, again, it's neither here nor there. The people donating to political parties are doing so because they want that political party to do well. The money that's needed to stop people struggling is, already available or to at least make progress on it. I mean, one thing, obviously, when Labour have been in for a few years, we're still going to have poverty, but we are going to have less poverty than when they started, because that is just always what happens. Could the Lib Dems challenge Rochdale now? I don't know. They look too far behind, but I mean, again, it's correct. I'll tell you what I suspect will happen. My last word on the Rochdale thing, I think, because we have run out of time. What I suspect will happen with Rochdale is, because it's all now a complete skip fire. I mean, let's look at it. Let's look at what's happened. So Labour's candidate, which is now no longer Labour's candidate, but Labour's candidate on the ballot, conspiracy theorist, right? The Green Party candidate did a racism, so the Green Party dropped them as well, but they will still be on the ballot as the Green Party candidate. The Reform UK candidate is a Labour reject who harassed a teenage girl with sexually explicit messages. So basically, we may only have the Lib Dem and the Conservative candidates vaguely normal. The Conservatives are not likely to have much support in Rochdale. What may happen is you already get a lower turnout, and you have obviously George Galloway, the lunatic. So you already have a low turnout in by-elections anyway. You may find that it's just a catastrophically low turnout. It may just be that it ends up being such a low turnout that who knows? Who knows? But there we go. Oh, there's another super chat from Wallinger Pagan I missed, apparently. Okay, I've got to find that now. Did I? Oh, yes, there it is. Wallinger Pagan, £5 super chat, thank you. It says, Lib Dems and Labour making more noise down here in the southwest, really hoping the trend continues. My shield at your back's my lefty kin. Well, I mean, there's no part of the country where the Tories are really doing well now. Even their heartlands are under assault. What Rishi Sunak really should have done was shore that up, and he hasn't done. Rishi Sunak has attempted badly to try and keep together this coalition that was won in 2019. Not working. It was never going to work, because it's not just that it's too. The needs of these people are too different. They're mutually exclusive. They're antagonistic. In order to appeal to one group of voters, you have to disappoint another. The only way it worked in 2019 was, not only did Labour run such a terrible campaign, not just in the general election itself, but in the year leading up to it, absolutely dreadful. But the Conservatives just lied. It was the typical Brexit lies. We're going to deliver this to you. Oh, doesn't that mean that we won't get it? No, this to you as well. We're going to give you all this investment, and we're not going to raise taxes to do it. That was the offer. That was what the Tories said. They cannot get away with saying that again, because it's all lies. It's been proven to be lies. What are the Tories doing today? They're saying, Rishi Sunak was saying last night, we're going to build more houses and we're going to build them in the right place. No, you're not. No, you're not. 14 years they've been in place and they've never done this. Rishi Sunak's been in place for over a year. He's never going to do it. They just keep saying they will and then not doing it. But anyway, I'm going to have to leave it there. Thank you very much for coming on. We've gone well over again. Have a very good day, everyone. Don't forget to click the like button and subscribe to the channel, of course. And until next time, I'll see you later.